Hello and welcome to that Quirky Bird Girl podcast. I am your host, Steph, and I will be diving in today with a special guest. I am so excited to introduce you all to someone who has inspired me at every step along my content creation journey. She was one of the very first people that I followed on Instagram and TikTok, and she has taught me so much about embracing the birds and experiencing life. Her excitement and love for birds has no bounds, and she has made birding feel like a place that I can call. Heather Wolf will be joining us today. Heather is a Brooklyn-based birder, author, photographer, and educator. She works with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology as a web developer, and she teaches birding classes at Brooklyn Botanic Garden and gives walks and talks for various organizations throughout New York City and beyond. In addition to all of this amazing work that Heather has done, she has also written two books, Birding at the Bridge and Find More Birds. I am so happy to have you here, Heather. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Steph. I mean, I am inspired by everything you share on social media and really just opening people's eyes to the bird life around them and just finding pleasure in some of the simple things, even with common birds. And that's how I feel about it as well. And I'm so glad that we can inspire each other. And thank you for having me here today. I love it.
I'm so grateful for your time. What has brought you to birds?
Well, it's interesting. I live in Brooklyn now in New York City, and I lived here before I got into birds. And then I moved to Florida on the Gulf Coast in Pensacola, and I lived on Pensacola Beach there, and I was surrounded by bird life and marine life, dolphins, stingrays, and birds. One day I was taking a walk on a paved path that went through the sand dunes, and a certain bird that kind of looked like a gull, but not really, started squawking and kind of like diving towards my head. So I had my water bottle and I kind of like rotated it above my head and ran all the way home. But I was really intrigued by what was going on with this bird and why it was trying to attack me. So I went home and looked on the internet and about, bird looks like a seagull, attacking me. And I found out that these birds nest in the sand, but their nests are not really nests at all. I mean, there are depressions in the sand. Maybe there's some shells and pebbles that border the nest or line the nest, and they're just very vulnerable. The eggs and the chicks are so vulnerable. And so anytime a predator gets near them, including a human, they really get aggressive. And, I wasn't traipsing that close to the nest. I was on a paved path. But from that, I learned this time of year, we don't want to be traipsing through these areas. And I noticed a little further east on the road, there were signs like, I think it was 20 mile an hour because these birds, the young birds, were crossing the road. So, it was just really neat to see. And that kind of piqued my interest. And then I moved back to Brooklyn about 5 years later. And, this new park had opened near where I live called Brooklyn Bridge Park. And I really didn't know that much about urban birding at all, but I started taking a look and I could not believe what I found. As you know, I mean, urban birding is amazing, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that more. So, I mean, really, there was no looking back after I got into birds in Florida and moved here and just continued it on. And it's more than a hobby. It's a lifestyle for me. Birds are everywhere, and I can't imagine life without them now.
That's so beautiful. And since moving from Florida now to Brooklyn, because how long have you been living in Brooklyn now?
I've been back for about 12 years. So I lived here 5 years, and I was in Florida 5 years and been here 12 years. So I started birding in 2010 down in Florida. So I guess I had been down in Florida a few years before I really started actively looking at birds. But that's where I met my mentors down there, Bob and Lucy Duncan, who led a lot of field trips and organized trips through the Pensacola Audubon chapter down there called Francis Weston Audubon. And they really took me under their wing, and I'm still in touch with them today. I was just down there in April, and I got to present a talk at that chapter meeting where I had first stepped in years ago and met them. And I kind of shed a tear when I got up there. I got a little choked up, but I was able to continue and finish the talk.
So beautiful. And I'm sure having the mentors really helped shape your experience or relationship.
They're so amazing. Yes.
I mean, from there, how has your love for the birds evolved over the years?
I'm fascinated by them. I mean, I initially when I started birding, I couldn't wait to see a new species. And of course, being in Brooklyn now, I don't have a car, so I really focus on what's called a patch. So it's a place that a birding patch is someplace you can bird often, most days of the week, that's close to home, and you can really get to know the bird life of that area. So since I've been in Brooklyn, I've really embraced patch birding, and I go to the same place, most days. That's not to say I don't take trips around New York City or to other places, but now, whereas when I started, I would kind of take road trips to go see birds like, wood storks in Florida or spoonbills and things like that. Now I just see what's happening in the patch. It could be the same mockingbird every day or some house sparrows taking dust baths or whatever. And I kind of feel like the birding journey for people can go in phases. Like for me, I may, find myself with a car one day somewhere else and taking more, road trips to get cool birds and things like that and follow the reports of rare birds and things like that. But right now I'm like patch birder, kind of just loving it and just loving getting to know the birds of Brooklyn Bridge Park.
So amazing. And I mean, I think it leads us so beautifully into talking about some amazing birds and favorites that we saw today.
I know. We had a great time. I mean, we started out our morning with a fly-in by a Cooper's hawk, right? We were on this little wooded path with a lot. It had just snowed last night too. So I always feel the winter is great for raptors because especially with the snow, they can see the birds foraging, clearly. And amongst the leaves of the snow, they see the movement. So it's ripe for them to get their prey. But we didn't see the Coopers catch anything, right? But it flew in and that was pretty neat, right?
Oh my gosh, that was so exciting. I think it was right after we saw the northern cardinal, and my head always goes to, okay, I think we know what they might have their eye on, right?
Definitely. Yeah, the cardinal really stood out on a day like today. And then we also had some common ravens, a pair of common ravens circling overhead, which is always great. I mean, they've really been showing up in Brooklyn for the past few years, and they even have been nesting on the Brooklyn Bridge the past few years.
My goodness. So during the nesting season, that's kind of some activity that you can watch a little bit. Is that
Exactly. So usually, the blackbirds usually arrive first for the during spring migration and blackbirds, crows, things, grackles, things like that. And the crows were often starting to nest around March, but this past year, for some reason, they started and then abandoned, and then they came back late. I think it was like June or something, which was kind of crazy, but they did have a nest there. And yeah, they nest in the tower that's on the east side of the bridge, the east side tower of the Brooklyn Bridge, right where the cables meet the structure of the arches, pretty much.
Gosh, that is so exciting. And I think we stopped for a little while also to take in some of the American robins. What is your experience seeing them sort of prepare for the nesting season?
With the robins, they're one of the city's most common nesters in the parks. There's always a robin's nest in Brooklyn Bridge Park. And sometimes, it's a little worrisome how visible they are and vulnerable they are because the thing with urban birding that you have a lot of these birds, especially the American robins, they start nesting and the weather starts to warm up and more people start to show up in the parks. They may start to build a nest and no one's around. And then a week later, all of a sudden there's crowds around and they thought this place was pretty secluded. And it turns out it wasn't. So, but robins are pretty hardy with the nesting. I haven't really seen any problems. I'm surprised how successful their nests are in these conditions. Today we saw them feasting on juniper berries. I mean, there were juniper trees just full of berries, and they were just loving that area. So it's just great. It always makes me so happy when these birds find good food sources, especially in this this severe weather, like right after a snowstorm. And what did you think about the mockingbird with taking a little drink there?
Oh, I loved how long it was taking, just taking its sweet, sweet time to drink all of the water that was there. It was really great, and I love seeing the northern mockingbirds coming from the Midwest. It's just it's a great experience, and then also being part of some of their mimicry, really exciting. Yeah, what is it like living so close by so many northern mockingbirds?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I love them. I mean, they're so, aggressive and territorial. So they provide so much entertainment and sleepless nights. And sleepless nights because a lot of times during the summer, if a male can't find a mate, it will sing all night long. And I had heard this, walking to and from the subway a couple of times, but I think it was maybe 2 years ago. It happened right outside my window. So I all night long. I it didn't bother me. I didn't get any sleep, but I kind of enjoyed it. It was just singing its heart out all night, 2, 3 in the morning. It would arrive about 1 and then just start singing. It's fascinating. I love them. And then what I really love is in the parks, they like these open areas, so they like lawns with a perimeter that has, some trees. And in the summer, they're nesting. They have their active nests, and people are, lounging on the lawns, sunbathing or hanging out, having picnics. And the mockingbird, for that, whose territory it is, or the pair, especially the male, will just be, not necessarily singing, imitating, but kind of making those calls, the aggressive calls, like, this is my turf, get out of here, but nobody's hearing it. Like as birders, we kind of tune into that, but it's just funny to see the mockingbird kind of freaking out and everybody's just enjoying their summer, and the mockingbird's so stressed. One specific summer, this mockingbird, or maybe it was one or two, but I found like 6 mockingbird nests over the course from spring to the end of summer. And not all of them were active. I think maybe some were started, they started construction on them and then left. But I think at least 3 or 4 were fledged, and a lot of mockingbirds. And I always wonder, where do they go, right? Because they disperse. They don't stick together like crows or anything. But yeah, I love the mockingbirds, and it's great that they're year round. So, you can always count on them to be out there and be entertaining and fun.
I'm so curious, how are you able to identify those mockingbird nests?
The mockingbird nests don't really use mud. So like the robin is the most common nest in my patch. So I think the gray catbirds, which also nest here, have a little bit of mud, but they tend to use a little more plastic and some trash stuff in their nests. And then the mockingbirds are loose kind of twigs. So it's really about what are the birds that are nesting. And there are quite a few. I think there's like a dozen birds that nest in the park, but the ones that nest in trees, that narrows it down, So yeah, I'm kind of used to I've seen mockingbirds in the nests, and I know it's loose twigs. You can also catch them building them, so that helps you see what they're doing and helps you identify those nests.
That is so exciting, and seeing your behavior change, like, season to season, how does that resonate or sit with you?
Well, it's so weird, right? When I see a mockingbird that's not singing, it's just so crazy. But that happens in the winter. And every time I see it, I'll just say that's the quietest mockingbird I've ever seen because, they're just so aggressive and loud during the spring and summer. Yeah, I mean, because today we didn't hear them singing, right? I think we heard one kind of calling, not the one we saw, some other one, but we didn't hear them singing, imitating or anything like that.
Yeah, it was really exciting, and I think, you shared with me that there were lesser black-backed gulls that were, like, around or nearby the greater black-backed gulls that we saw
So we saw a few greater blackback gulls out at the Pier 1 in Brooklyn Bridge Park, and there's recently been a lesser blackback gull, which is uncommon, somewhat rare for the area. We didn't see it today because it probably won't get there till dusk. Because what's really cool in the winter here is that the gulls, there's so many gulls, and they roost at night together. So around sunset time, a lot of the gulls will start congregating on the pilings that we saw at Pier 1, and that lesser blackback will probably show up. So, quite a few birders may go out there and to see that nighttime roost and see the lesser blackback arrive. There's also another area of Brooklyn Bridge Park that's the marina, Pier 4, Pier 5, 4, and 4 marina. And some nights there are up to 1,000 ring-billed gulls roosting there, which is wild. And some nights I will go out there, and I did once find a black-headed gull over there, which doesn't have a fully black head this time of year, but it's got like a reddish bill and reddish legs, so it's pretty easy to distinguish. But yeah, the gulls are really neat. You'll just, if you're out there at sunset, you'll just see them just flying from all ends of the city to just like descend on this roost. It's pretty wild.
Gosh, that must be so exciting to see. And that's throughout the whole year that you're seeing that?
It's mostly just winter. So in the summer there aren't as many gulls down here. They're more up north, but you still get pretty much the same, like, well, I shouldn't say that. Like the rarities aren't here much in the summer. The rarities you're going to see here in the winter. But the three main gulls here in New York City are the American herring gull, the ring-billed gull, and the great blackback gull. And then in the summer, the laughing gulls, with those ones with the black head, which those are great. I love seeing those, and they're not here this time of year. They stay pretty late in fall, but usually they're not here this time of year. But there are other rare gulls like glaucous gull and Iceland gull that can show up here in the winter. And that's a whole other study. I've got a whole book on gulls, and it's like I barely cracked it, but it's difficult to distinguish gulls a lot of times, not only because different species look the same, but also a lot of these gulls take years, a few years, sometimes 4 years to reach maturity. So they have different stages of what they look like. And they can almost look like some of the other species, at different stages. But gulls are challenging. I'm sure one day I'll get more deep into gulls. So
That's so exciting. And I think with gulls, you were saying that it can be difficult to identify. Do you have any advice for maybe people who are coming to New York, maybe to even a patch in Brooklyn, and they're new to gulls but want to start identifying it for them?
the first step with gulls, or really with any species in an area, is to kind of get familiar with what to expect. Like, what are the common gull species that are in New York at this time of year? And you can do that by visiting various resources. My favorite, of course, is eBird. That's where I work at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. You can type in, if you go to ebird.org or you have the app, you can type in your county, search your county for what birds are being seen in the area, and see bar charts of birds that are here this time of year. And by doing that, you would discover that the American herring gull, the great blackback gull, and the ring-billed gull are here during the winter. That narrows it down. I mean, the rarities are, like I mentioned, those are fewer. So you want to get used to the birds. And, great blackback gulls, they're the largest gull in the world, but American herring gulls are pretty big too. But the great blackback, the adults have a black back. And if you come across a lesser blackback, they have a much yellower bill and like a kind of a smudgy face sometimes. And they look quite different. They have bright yellowish legs, but it can be tough. But if you see multiples of something that look very similar, that's probably not a rarity this time of year. So you could say, oh, there's a really large gull. They have a black back. There's 10 of them. It's probably not a lesser blackback because that's a rare bird. There might be one. So that narrows it down. That's a great blackback gull. Also, just use your field guides. You could take pictures. They don't have to be great pictures, but any, photo, you can run it through the Merlin Photo ID. The Merlin Bird ID app also from Cornell Lab of Ornithology is a great way to help you out with all of these things. You can even, I'm sure most of you have used Merlin Sound ID, where you can when birds sing, it will record and give you suggestions of what those birds might be. But and often a feature that people may not know about is the step-by-step ID in Merlin, which lets you answer a series of questions like, what is the size of the bird? Where is it? What is it doing? And it will return suggested birds based on the answers to your questions and the birds you can expect to see in the area where you are in at that time.
That's amazing, amazing advice. And what about your love for sparrows? Could you tell me a little bit about where that started? Maybe you could even use some examples from today.
I'm not really sure. I just think they're so cute, really. But I remember when I was birding in Florida, when I was started, I remember going out to the parking lot and I saw this little bird, and looked like a sparrow, but it had yellow, like between the eye and the bill, which is the lower area. I didn't know that at the time. Really bright yellow, and I got so excited. I thought it was something rare, but it wasn't rare. But it was a white-throated sparrow. And little did I know when I moved back to Brooklyn that white-throated sparrows were everywhere. It turned out to be my favorite bird. It's been my favorite bird, probably since the first winter I had in Brooklyn, because the thing about the white-throated sparrow is it's here during winter. So they breed in the boreal forest of Canada, and then they're here all winter, and they sing in the winter. And they have that splash of yellow. So they just like get me through the winter. It's just so fun to watch them forage. They do a double hop scratch in the leaves to forage for food. And so I bet that my love of sparrows stems from the fact that I love the white-throated sparrow so much. And the other thing too is that a lot of sparrows are, when you're first birding, they're a challenge to ID. But once you start looking at them, they really do have their own looks. Like the field sparrow has like a little pinkish bill and a white eye ring. It almost looks like it's wearing makeup to me. It's like so dainty and cute. And then the Lincoln sparrow has very thin streaking on the breast, which distinguishes it from the song sparrow. And I think just generally, and I'm sure you've experienced this yourself, like it can be so difficult to know the difference until you've seen it. Like until I saw a Lincoln sparrow, I didn't know if I'd be able to tell it was a Lincoln sparrow. And I don't know that I did the first time. Maybe someone told me. But once you see it, oh gosh, it helps so much more. You're like, okay, I get it, what you mean by thinner streaks and cinnamon flakes on the Lincoln sparrow. But I guess, and sparrows they're around a lot. Another thing I love is they're easy to look at because a lot of the times they're on the ground. So I like to look in the leaf litter rather than cranking my neck to try to find little birds in trees. Of course I do that too, but that's another reason I like them.
Yeah, I think I experienced that actually with you, with the swamp sparrow that we saw
Mhm.
the last time that we went birding. I mean, I always say that it takes me at least 5 times seeing a bird before I feel completely comfortable in identifying.
Sparrows have a lot of different looks too, because sometimes, basically the white-throated sparrow doesn't have streaks on its breast, but a lot of times it does actually. That's not how a field guide would describe it, but in certain plumage stages, it looks like it has some very faint streaks on the breast. So yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's behavior cues and clues and the other birds they're hanging out with, and also tail length and bill shape and size. There's so many cool ways to compare them. But once again, like I mentioned with the gulls, it's like what's in the area is so helpful, because if you're looking at a guide, especially of North America, there's so many sparrows in there. So it's better to use like eBird or a more specific city or state field guide to narrow down the choices of what you're going to see, what's possible to see for common birds in the area.
And when you started birding for your patch, was that something that you had like a local field guide or something along those lines, or was it more just experience based that you had this?
I started out with the National Geographic Field Guide to the Birds of North America. I had that, and I also had a guide that was with photographs, because the National Geographic is illustrations, and then I also had another one with photographs. And I think I used to bring the National Geographic one with me out in the field, and then yeah, I mean, I would look it up. I would look at the bird. I mean, it's with bird identification, it's tricky because you see a bird and you immediately want to jump to the field guide to try to identify it. But really, with time, I learned, and I mentioned this to my students in my classes, that if you can resist the temptation to jump to the field guide or the app and kind of observe the bird, because you could and take notes if you have a notebook, or take mental notes or in your phone, because there are so many clues. It's not just the way the bird looks. So, do note what it looks like in colors, but also what is it eating? How is it foraging? What kind of sounds is it making? What's its interaction like with other birds? So, but yeah, I think having a field guide is super useful, especially when starting, or when visiting a place where you don't know the birds, when you travel, things like that.
Actually, it's so interesting to me that you mention that related to the field guide, because I always feel like I can't identify unless I confirm it with the field guide. And I'm not sure if you also went through some of that, or if like it's really like an incredible amount of trust that you have with yourself, or like built over time. but what was your experience with that?
The thing about having a patch is I know the birds that are there. I'm so used to seeing these birds all the time. I mean, occasionally I'll see a flycatcher that I can't identify unless I hear it or something. But no, I remember I bought some kind of it was a Peterson field guide, and I think I saw a mockingbird out somewhere in Florida, and I had no idea what it is. Like I couldn't find it in the field guide. And then it turns out the more research I did, it was a mockingbird, and the mockingbird was on the cover of the Peterson field guide. And I'm like, so I definitely went through periods where I'm like, this bird is in the I because birds have so many looks depending on the time of year, the light, everything, and sometimes it doesn't look like there's a match in the field guide or everything looks so similar. So I definitely went through that and do when I travel. I'll not be sure of something, and I do miss that. That's what's so fun about when you start birding, because it's funny because you meet new birders, and a lot of times some people are frustrated. Oh, I don't know what this bird is, but I'm like, well, but that's the fun part because you're getting to do the sleuthing, and that's how you're learning, and then when you figure it out, you're like, oh my gosh, this is what it is. Like I'm in a different phase here with the patch where okay, I pretty much know most of the stuff. If something comes through in spring, something rare, maybe I won't recognize it. I'll take a bunch of pictures. I'll look through all of my field guides and look online and ask friends. I love that process. And yes, I mean, we all have to go through that. It's just like with any skill. You have to and make errors. You have to make mistakes and learn. You'll never forget those kind of things. And one of the things I write about in my first book, Burning at the Bridge, is I was hearing this vocalization out in the field, like going, teacher, 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 like this. Teacher, teacher. And I kept looking up in the trees. Couldn't find it, couldn't find it, couldn't find it. And then this ovenbird struts out from the leaf litter onto the cement. And I'm like, that was not in the trees. It was just right at my feet the whole time. It was hidden though. It was hidden, granted. And from that moment on, I never forgot the ovenbird call. That song, I would never. So those are the kind of embarrassing, fun experiences you go through to get better at bird identification, sound identification, all of these things.
That's such an amazing bird to have that experience with too, because they
Oh
are
yeah,
so
it was funny.
yeah. So it's clear that you have this passion and drive and love for birds. How did that take shape into now being your career?
Yeah, I guess it is my career, right? Because so during the day, I work for Cornell Lab of Ornithology as a web developer, and I work on eBird and Birdcast sites. I had been using the eBird, app to record my sightings when I was in Florida. So when I saw that was a position open for a web developer and I had experience in that, I did ask if there were openings, and I started there about 8 years ago. And it's really neat that to be able to combine my tech skills with birds. I mean, it's really really neat, and I always encourage people, whatever kind of skill you like, even if it doesn't mesh with some of your other passions or hobbies, they can come together. Like if you take your time and keep your eye out, if there's a place like or a company or nonprofit that you really want to work for related to one of your passions outside of your, say, job related skills, just believe it, like, and seek those positions out and keep trying. And you never know. I mean, because it's crazy how life works. Things kind of come together and everything seems related all of a sudden. You're like, whoa, this is kind of cool. So
That must have been so exciting, I'm sure, 8 years ago and still even today. But I'm curious as well, like, how do you balance the passion and then also it being something that is your career?
I don't know, it just kind of all melds together. I love to do things. I juggle, I do yoga, practice Spanish. I know you're fluent as well. All of these things kind of relate, like I said, because yoga helps me stay fit and in shape for birding. Speaking Spanish is related to birds because there are a lot of birds in South America, and I've gone down there a lot to see birds. Maybe I have no balance in my life. It's just all kind of one thing that's all related, and I don't know, but I don't feel that it's detrimental to me, but maybe it is. Who knows?
No, I mean, it sounds like you have such a positive relationship across your career and then also as a hobby, a passion. That's really amazing. And I think I'd love to like emulate that similar passion like moving forward in my career.
Thanks. You're definitely, on the road there. I mean, I love what you're doing, and birding with you is just, it's so awesome. We have so much fun because we're just marveling at, these birds doing their thing. And it's such an experience. It's just, there's a lot of people talk about like nature baths, like there's this term, like you go out and into nature and it's like you're taking a nature bath and it's good for you. And I think of that too. If I'm feeling like, oh, I don't really feel like going out in the freezing cold or whatever, but hey, no, I need my nature bath because it's good for me. And birding is just, if you're into birding too, you're just doing that all the time. So,
It's like the perfect combination of health and love for the birds.
yeah.
I'm curious if over the next year, is there a sparrow that you hope to see or experience?
There is a bird that's sparrow-like that I wanted to see in my patch. I have seen it. It's not a sparrow though. It's in the cardinal family. It's called a dickcissel. And I have seen it like further north at Croton Point Park, but I really want to see it. It's like the nemesis bird for my patch. Other people have seen it there in Brooklyn Bridge Park, but I have not. So it's always my goal to try to see that in my patch. So that is, and then I will say when I was in Oaxaca last spring and saw the Oaxaca sparrow, which was kind of like just little brown thing, and it was really exciting. But yeah, I mean, and I am going to Panama this March, and I'll definitely check out what the options. There aren't that many sparrows down there. I notice in South America, but maybe there will be something down there that I could see.
Is there a particular bird as well for your trip to Panama that you're hoping to see?
Yeah, I want to see puffbird. I don't know the exact species, but I've always missed puffbirds when I've been in Colombia. But they're really cute. They're kind of puffy, you know. And any kind of puffbird I will take. I would love to see that down in Panama. Yeah.
My gosh,
Do you have a
that sounds
sparrow
like
you want
so.
to see in New York?
I would love to see the fox sparrow. Yeah, I have only seen it in Chicago in the suburbs, so their dark colors make them stand out so much, and I think their behavior, um, it'd be great to see.
Yeah, they are just so beautiful. They're striking.
Have you seen any here in New York?
Yeah, I mean they've been. I'm surprised we didn't see any today. I've seen like a pair of them recently. It might have just been too snowy for them or something. But yeah, they're around, and we've often have them overwintering here in Brooklyn Bridge Park. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm sure you'll run into them if not at Brooklyn Bridge Park, in other places in the city. They're around.
Okay, I will give you a call as soon as I see one if we're not together.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, what, Heather, is your favorite fun fact that you can share about sparrows?
I mean, I think I I don't know if it's like a fact about generally about sparrows, but about the white-throated sparrow is that the white-throated sparrow's song has changed recently. They discovered in British Columbia, I think around the 2000 mark or something, that white-throated sparrows sing this sweet Canada, Canada, Canada. Some of these sparrows were singing like, oh, sweet Canada, Canada, Canada. So instead of triplets, it was like duplets. And I think this was first discovered, like I said, 2000, something like this, but it spread. So like now, like west of the Rockies, all of the white-throated sparrows sing the duplet, the new song, and a lot of the birds east of there sing the duplets as well. There are still some eastern birds that sing the triplets. The study was done in Nature Journal or something like this. And basically, this change happened over 20 years, which is not that long. So like it happened very quickly, and they theorized that on the wintering grounds, both different populations of these birds from the east and west wintered in the same locations, and potentially the young birds were learning the new song, and then also that maybe the females were more attracted to this new variation of this song, so then more males started singing it. Who knows? But just the fact that the white-throated sparrow's song has changed in the span of only 20 years is pretty cool fact.
Wow, that is really interesting. And the times that I think that they've spent with dark-eyed juncos as well, my mind goes to birds that what has influenced them? I'm so curious.
I know, it's amazing. What an amazing world they are in. Yeah, I love it.
It's amazing we get to experience some of it
I
alongside
know.
them.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about like a favorite story or experience that you had with a sparrow?
When I lead walks, people that come on my walks know my favorite bird is a white-throated sparrow. So, I mean, literally, a lot of times when I lead walks, I'll say, "Oh, and we'll see a white-throated sparrow, and it's not singing," and I'll go, "Sing for us," and it'll start singing. And it doesn't always happen, but a lot of times it happens. And I think that's fun. That's a fun story. I mean, and another one is one time I was chasing a sparrow, like I saw it fly into this um, like into this dense brush. And I go over there to try to find it, and I didn't find it, but I saw these two giant feet and looked up, and it was a giant black crowned night herons. What I loved is like through looking at a little, sparrow trying to find it, I found something else. And that's how it works with birding. Even if you don't find the bird that you're looking for or that you were following to try to get a look at to identify, you'll notice other things like whether it be plants or insects or a black crowned night heron.
Yeah. And I think with that as well, like your knowledge about birds, when we were walking around today, you were mentioning a specific type of leaf in a tree. So can you speak to how you've gone from this love to birds to also knowing so much about trees or the wildlife in the
Thanks.
area?
Yeah, I don't feel I know that. Yeah, there's so much. Trees and plants are so difficult. Oh my gosh. And I make tons of mistakes on those all the time. But being in a patch, this is another benefit of patch birding, is that when you go to the same place all the time, you'll start asking these questions. Okay, well, I always see cedar waxwings in this tree eating berries. What are these berries? Right. So then you can take a picture, check iNaturalist for suggestions on what that is. Like hawthorn berries or in the trees, the robins love them, the cedar waxwings love them. Also, like fascinating stories, like there's something called bayberry, which they're these really hard little tiny berries, and the yellow rump warbler is one of the few warblers that can survive on these berries and doesn't need to have insects during the winter necessarily. Like a lot of these warblers, most of them take off because they need insects to survive, and the yellow rump warbler can survive on this bayberry. They can digest that berry, whereas certain birds can't. So like these fascinating things with the plant associations are huge. Plus, it also helps you identify birds because like certain birds like certain plants or nest in certain types of trees or eat certain types of seeds. So it kind of helps you. Like I said, all the information you can gather about this bird you're trying to identify, what it's eating, and what kind of habitat it's foraging in are huge clues.
So fascinating. I think with that, we're coming to a close, Heather. It has been so great to have you on. I think before we end, I'd love for you to share with us the things that you have going on over the next few weeks, maybe your socials, so that followers or listeners can continue following your bird journey.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been great. I could talk all day with you. All of my socials you could access if you go to brooklynbridgebirds.com. So that'll have my Instagrams, which specifically are Real Heather Wolf and Brooklyn Bridge Birds. And then I'm on TikTok at Heather Wolf. And I recently got on Blue Sky and I cannot remember what my handle is for that, but I'm on there. I'm sure if you search my name, Heather Wolf, you'll find me. And then I do lead walks in Brooklyn Bridge Park. And I always say I accept nudges. Like if somebody is going to be visiting Brooklyn or on a certain weekend, just, send me an email. I'm at hwbirds@gmail.com. And I could just schedule a walk for you and reserve you a spot. I like to do that. Also, I'm teaching at Brooklyn Botanic Garden again this spring, beginning birding, which I love doing. And if you check heatherwolf.com events, the events tab, I've got my upcoming events, some Zoom talks and things like that I post on there. Thank you so much, Steph, for having me on. And I love what you're doing with your podcast and with your social content. I mean, it's really amazing. It's just I love how you share the what you're seeing, and you post a lot. It's really inspiring. I feel like I'm like out there birding with you, so it's great.
That is so sweet. That is completely the intention. So I really appreciate you saying that. And it has just been so great to learn more about you and your story, what has made you fall in love with birds. And thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Steph. I'll see you
This has been another episode of my podcast here, That Quirky Bird Girl. I am so, so happy and so grateful to have guests on like Heather. She is so, so amazing. You all already know that. This is such a great platform for anyone of any level with birds. If you're new, if you've been out birding for a really long time, I invite you all to tune in, and I'm grateful you all made some time for this podcast. We'll see you all very, very soon, and I hope you have an amazing, amazing day. Thanks for watching.